Good Thursday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. For the Star Wars fans out there, thanks for tuning in to our reading for today, which is in Numbers chapter 32, which contains somewhat kind of strange. I don't know if strange is the right word. Maybe interesting. It's an interesting text concerning the continued progression of the people toward the promised land, towards settling the promised land. And the reality is that some of the tribes don't exactly make it all the way into the promised land. And we're going to see why that is the case here. I'm going to go ahead and real fast just show a map for you so that you can have this visualization in your head of what we're talking about today. So remember, hopefully you can see my mouse here on the map. Remember, they're coming up from this direction. They're coming up from this direction to go into the promised land. They're going to come up here, and then they're going to end up crossing over. Let me see if I can find it real fast. I do not see it. They're going to cross over somewhere along the Jordan River right here into the promised land. So they work their way up this way, and as they're getting ready to cross over, we're going to have the events of this chapter spoken about. So we see here Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. There's East Manasseh here, with West Manasseh being on this side. So what is going to end up taking place is they're going to be here because of the events of this particular text. So keep that in mind as we're reading today, and I'll pull this up again later on so that you can have this on the screen so you can see have a visual of what the results of this chapter are going to be. Let's read here together in Numbers chapter 32 and verse number 1. The Reubenites and Gadites had a very large number of livestock. When they surveyed the lands of Jazer and Gilead, they saw that the region was a good one for livestock. So the Gadites and Reubenites came to Moses, the priest Eleazar, and the leaders of the community and said, the territory of Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Sabam, Nebo, and Beon, which Yahweh struck down before the community of Israel, is a good land for livestock, and your servants own livestock. They said, if we have found favor with you, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Don't make us cross the Jordan. But Moses asked the Gadites and Reubenites, should your brothers go to war while you stay here? Why are you discouraging the Israelites from crossing into the land Yahweh has given them? That's what your ancestors did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. After they went up as far as Eshcol Valley and saw the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land Yahweh had given them. So Yahweh's anger burned that day, and he swore an oath. Because they did not remain loyal to me, none of the men 20 years old or more who came from Egypt will see the land I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. None except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzites, and Joshua, son of Nun, because they did remain loyal to Yahweh. Yahweh's anger burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years until the whole generation that had done what was evil in Yahweh's sight was gone. And here you, a brood of vipers, excuse me, got carried away there, a brood of sinners, stand in your ancestors' place, adding even more to Yahweh's burning anger against Israel. If you turn back from following him, he will once again leave this people in the wilderness, and you will destroy all of them. Then they approached him and said, we want to build sheep pens here for our livestock and cities for our dependents, but we will arm ourselves and be ready to go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our dependents will remain in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the lands. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites has taken possession of his inheritance. Yet, we will not have an inheritance with them across the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance will be across the Jordan to the east. Moses replied to them, verse number 20. Numbers 32, verse 20, Moses replied to them, if you do this, if you arm yourselves for battle before Yahweh, and every one of your armed men crosses the Jordan before Yahweh until he has driven his enemies from his presence, and the land is subdued before Yahweh, afterward you may return to be free from the obligation to Yahweh and to Israel, and this land will belong to you as a possession before Yahweh. But if you don't do this, you will certainly sin against Yahweh. Be sure your sin will catch up with you. Build cities for your dependents and pens for your flocks, but do what you have promised. Verse 25, the Gadites and Reubenites answered Moses, your servants will do just as my Lord commands. Our dependents, wives, livestock, and all our animals will remain here in the lands of Gilead. But your servants are equipped for war before Yahweh and will go ahead and will go across to battle as my Lord orders. So Moses gave orders about them to the priest Eleazar, Joshua son of Nun, and the family heads of the Israelite tribes. Moses told them, if the Gadites and Reubenites across the Jordan with you, every man in battle formation before Yahweh, if the Gadites and Reubenites cross the Jordan with you, every man in battle formation before Yahweh, and the land is subdued before you, you are to give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they don't go across with you in battle formation, they must accept land in Canaan with you. The Gadites and Reubenites replied, what Yahweh has spoken to your servants is what we will do. We will cross over in battle formation before Yahweh into the land of Canaan, but we will keep our hereditary possession across the Jordan. So Moses gave them, the Gadites, Reubenites, and half the tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of King Sihon of the Amorites, and the kingdom of King Og of Bashan, the land including its cities with the territory surrounding them. The Gadites rebuilt Dibon, Ataroth, Aroer, Atroth, Shofan, Jazer, Jogbaha, Beth Nimrah, and Beth Haran as fortified cities, and built sheep pens. The Reubenites rebuilt Heshbon, Elealeh, Kiriathim, as well as Nebo and Baal Meon, whose names were changed, and Sema. They gave names to the cities they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Gilead, captured it, and drove out the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Gilead to the clan of Machir, son of Manasseh, and they settled in it. Jair, a descendant of Manasseh, went and captured the villages, which he renamed Jair's villages. Nobah went and captured Kenath with its surrounding villages and called it Nobah after his own name. And that is Numbers chapter 32. Again, they're making their way toward the promised land. We had back earlier in the book, the failure of the people to enter in. And so now they are going back for a second time after that previous generation has passed away. It's now time for them to go approach once more and have the opportunity to get into the promised land, to conquer it and to settle. And yet before they get there, we have these two tribes. The first time they're mentioned, it is Reuben and Gad. After that, though, Gad is always put first. So it seems probably here Reuben was put first because of his seniority as the oldest brother. But it might be that Gad being mentioned first the rest of the time means that they were the ones who really wanted to push this possibility. Maybe they attracted Reuben as a partner in this because of Reuben's status as the older son. Possibly that's what's going on here. But the question or the issue arises from the fact that as they're getting ready to go into the promised land, again, let me put up this map for you so I can show you what I'm talking about. As they're approaching from this direction, they're looking at all this land here. What's mentioned here is the lands of Jazer right here, and then the land of Gilead, which I guess is, here's Ramoth Gilead. So I guess we're talking about this area as well. I guess right in this whole area is what is under consideration, this entire space. That they see this, and I want you to notice the language that's used here. They saw that the region was a good one for livestock. I hope if you've been going through this reading with me, that the second you heard that, that raised your or grabbed your attention and hopefully caused you to think of some echoes from what we've previously seen. What should come, at least I hope so, to your mind first and foremost, is that this is very similar language to what happened with Eve in the garden, Genesis chapter 3, that after she had the interaction with the serpent, that she saw that the fruit was good for food, it was good to look at, it was good to make one wise. Then she took and ate of it. The second thing, actually, the second thing then would be the sons of God with the daughters of men. They saw that the daughters of man were very beautiful and took them. We know that ended up being a bad thing in Genesis chapter 6. Then also later on in Genesis, I want to say it's chapter 16, I'm guessing here, but let me double check here. Double check. No, it is actually a little before that. It is chapter 13, Genesis 13, where Abram and Lot have grown too big for them to occupy the same space. So Abram gives Lot the opportunity to choose where he's going to go. This is Genesis 13 and verse number 10. Lot looked out and saw that the entire plain of the Jordan, as far as Zoar, was well watered, everywhere like Yahweh's garden in the land of Egypt. So going from there, they end up making their way to Sodom. We know that disaster calls from that as well. So there's 3 instances just in the first 13 chapters of Genesis where whenever someone sees something and sees that it's good and takes it, bad things follow. And this is going to be the same case. It's going to be the same result here as well, because eventually they're going to be cut off from their people by way of the fact that they are literally taking up land outside of the promised land. Chapter 34 is going to, Yahweh is going to decree that the Jordan is the eastern, is this part of Canaan, the middle section, I guess we could say, that is the eastern border of Canaan. Outside of that is no longer in the promised land. So in a very real sense, East Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben are outside the promised land. They're not in the place that God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Furthermore, there's just a separation there. One of the issues that's going to come up later on is that they're going to build an altar, and the western portion, those who are actually in the promised land, see that. They think that Gad and Reuben and Manasseh have become idolatrous, but that's not the case at all. So it's just very problematic. Them not being in the promised land caused issues. And Moses saw that right away in the fact that his response to what they're saying, because again, they see this land, they think, oh, well, this is really, really good for all the herds that we have, so we'd rather have this, which in essence is them saying, we've been promised goodness within the land of Canaan, but we think what we have here is just as good, if not better, so we'd rather stay here. That's kind of spitting in God's face, saying that your promises are not as good as what we have here. So that in and of itself is not a good thing. But Moses' response is, here we go again. Last time we were about to enter into Canaan, we had this issue where the 10 spies out of the 12 came back and discouraged people from entering in. Well, now we have an interesting, ironic reversal that now 2 of the tribes are wanting to not enter in again. And you're just going to bring trouble upon us. This is not going to turn out well. You're going to end up getting us all killed. And they respond with a plan and a solution. But I missed a portion of that. The other portion was, and that's really the first thing that he says before he gets to the discouraging part. He says, so you want to just go ahead and hang out here and settle here while the rest of us have to go out to war. So the Gadites and Reubenites come back and say, no, we're going to go to war with you. We do want to stay here, yes. We are happy with where we are at here, yes. But we will, verse 17, we will arm ourselves and be ready to go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. So it's not just we're going to go with you, but they seem to be willing to lead the armies into battle and to help them in conquering the promised land. So it's not that we're just going to be able to avoid all the conflict by settling here. No, we'll go with you as well, and we'll even be in the lead as we do that. So Moses, he goes from being staunchly against it, very fiery and passionately denying this request to saying, okay, well, if you do this, if you'll go with us, then yes, sure, you can have this land as your possession. But if you don't, verse 23, you will certainly sin against Yahweh, and be sure your sin will catch up with you. So go ahead and build the cities, do what you want to now, but know that whenever it's time for war, it's time for war. And the Gadites and Reubenites answered Moses, verse 25, yep, we will do this. As soon as you call, we will hear. So Moses then instructs Eleazar, Joshua, and the family heads, tells them that this is what we're going to do. But whenever it's time for war, they're going to come. If they do, then let them have that land. If they don't, then they've got to come in here with us, which, again, that doesn't seem like very much of a punishment, but I mean, it is what it is. So the Gadites then respond in verse 31. I think this is very interesting. What Yahweh has spoken to your servants is what we will do. We will cross over in battle formation before Yahweh into the land of Canaan, but we will keep our hereditary possession across the Jordan. What's interesting here is that Yahweh's not been mentioned up to this point. There have been previous instances where Moses has been approached with some sort of question or proposition, and it says that he will seek Yahweh's will on the matter. I think about the 5 daughters of Zelophehad, who came to him asking about, what about our father's inheritance? We would like to keep that as well. He said, let me approach Yahweh on the matter. That doesn't happen here. At least it's not stated that it happens here. So I don't know if this right here is the evidence to show that Yahweh was actually involved in this, or if Moses just allowed this on his own and they just assume that Yahweh is doing this. It's just very interesting that there's nothing explicit apart from this mention in verse 31 that Yahweh was consulted on this issue. Maybe the fact that Eleazar was involved is his consulting. It's just very interesting that Moses changes so quickly and that this eventually does cause problems. Maybe Yahweh was consulted. He's like, you know what? Go ahead. They're going to get what they're asked for. Maybe so. I'm just not quite sure. That's something very interesting to think about. What's also interesting in verse 33, it says not just the Gadites and the Reubenites, but also half the tribe of Manasseh is also included here within this story. The allocation of half the tribe of Manasseh was generally to the north, and the tribe of Gad extending from the region of Gilead into Bashan and Golan. So here we go right here. So the Golan is here. We have, again, this illustration, Reuben here at the bottom, Gad here in this area, and then the eastern tribe of Manasseh taking up this full portion. Just from looking at this, you can see how much land Manasseh had overall between the two halves. And then Judah also has a great number. Simeon's is kind of funny because it's completely surrounded within Judah. But remember as well, going back to chapter, let's see here. Let me double check this real fast. Going back to chapter 26, where chapter 26, Yahweh spoke to Moses. This is verse 52. The land is to be divided among them as inheritance based on the number of names. Increase the inheritance for a large tribe and decrease it for a small one. Each is to be given as inheritance according to those who were registered in it. The land is to be divided by lots. They will receive an inheritance according to the names of their ancestral tribes. Each inheritance will be divided by lot among the larger and smaller tribes. So you could generally see here that the smaller tribes had less land and the larger tribes had more lands. So this just helps us understand exactly what's going on, because again, we're going to see this a map like this later on, and we're wondering, hold on a second, if this, because in chapter 34 again we're going to read specifically about the boundaries of the promised land. So we're going to read that chapter 34. We're going to say, okay, the promised land's boundaries, I'm going to make the map smaller here. Actually, let me see if I can do this real fast. No, I can't. The boundary is going to be, again, the Jordan, and up and down from the Jordan. So if that's the boundary, why are there tribes on the eastern side of the boundary? Why are there tribes beyond the boundary? Well, it's because of what happened here in chapter 32. Again, is this something that Yahweh was just completely on board with? Not really sure. Can't tell you with certainty, but it is something that eventually happens, and we'll see that it does again play a part in the story later on, whenever we see some conflict, I believe it's at the end of Joshua, between these tribes. And again, they see an altar, and the ones on the eastern side and say, well, we don't want the people to forget that they're Israelites. Well, maybe you should have stayed with the Israelites then in the promised land. That's neither here nor there. It is what it is. We'll see that as we move forward as well. But if you have any other questions or comments about what we see here in chapter 32, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below, whether you are on Facebook or YouTube, and I'd love to have a discussion with you about those things as well. Thanks so much for tuning into this reading on this Thursday, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day. May God bless you in all that you do, and hope you'll tune in again tomorrow as we read about the wilderness travels being reviewed. We'll read that together in Numbers chapter 33. Take care, and God bless.